Hello, and thank you for tuning in to another episode of CPA Review and More. We are pleased to bring you the #1 podcast for CPAs and CPA candidates. If you'd like to learn more about how Yaeger CPA Review can help you, find us on our website at YaegerCPAReview.com. Now, here's your host, Phil Yaeger.
Hello, everyone. This is Phil Yaeger, and this is CPA Review and More. And today, boy, I'll tell you, I have gone all over the country looking for people who are interesting, dynamic. And I found one. He's in California, Southern California. Well, I'm sitting here freezing in Maryland, but, I have nothing against that. And the gentleman's name is Vince LoRusso. And Vince is a CPA. He's a gamified skilling and education for accountants. All right, what he does. His area of specialization is blockchain. And he's are you in partnership with Oracle? Or are you working with Oracle?
We had ran a large student competition to show how blockchain works with Oracle. And that was an event specifically. So,
but people who don't know what blockchain is, can you just tell them briefly, from a layman's point of view, what that means, blockchain?
Yeah, I mean, essentially, it's a new way of tracking records and transfer of ownership or transfer of any sort of asset. And the way I like to put it is essentially nowadays we've got multiple entities involved in a transaction. Maybe it's supply chain management, and you're moving one product from the manufacturer to maybe a warehouse to ultimately the retail store. Now, each of those entities have their own independent ledger system. So they're tracking the movement all along the way. What blockchain allows us to do is get multiple external entities onto a single ledger and actually track information differently. And a lot of the elements of blockchain, which gets very technical and we can won't get into at the moment, but it allows them to be able to access this ledger in a very highly encrypted, private way, so that once a full transaction, or you've moved a bit of inventory from one entity to another, or maybe you bought real estate, and everyone involved in that transaction, they get a real-time view of the occurrence of the event and the details of that transaction in real time, and it becomes a single source of trust, and it removes a lot of friction in a transaction or accounting for a transaction.
Now, is this part of advisory services, blockchain? Mm-hmm. Is that what you're doing as part of consulting?
Yes. Yeah. And just to clarify, so yes, true up. So because we're gamified learning and education, one of the key areas we've identified for CPA firms and future CPAs is the lack of education around blockchain. So that's one reason why a lot of our content is oriented towards that. So we do other content, outside of that, other technologies and professional skill development as well. But yes, so back to your point, blockchain is one of those things that we all need to be aware of.
And it seems to say that people who are presently in universities are not getting are they getting education in this area in any way?
Yes. So in the last, especially year and a half, 2 years, we've been working closely with professors. And because we ran a student competition that partnered with Oracle and other blockchain platforms so that we could provide a hands-on experience, these professors are now using our content to actually teach students on how this works, and our simulations, which we'll show you shortly in this podcast. So yes, professors, because of how quickly blockchain has evolved, and a lot of the speculation, but also a lot of the most recent use cases and proof of concept, these professors are quickly trying to get curriculum and content around how do we educate our people, our students, and our future professionals on this topic.
Well, how many universities, though, are really involved in this? I mean, how many universities? Can you count them? How many are actually teaching this at the university level?
It's growing.
Is it a lot? Is it more than 10, less than 10?
Absolutely. Year over year, it has grown exponentially. The number of universities that either have come to us asking for more content, or that you've seen in the media with new blockchain programs. I mean, there's actually student clubs dedicated to blockchain and new accounting technologies affecting accounting.
Now, when you play these games, Are you going to walk away smiling like you would if you played Monopoly? Is that going to
Yes.
be? Is it? Oh, it is? Really?
To a degree. So, with our content, we have two styles of content. One type is our simulation based, where it's essentially clicking through and seeing how the technology applies in the context of an accounting transaction. And then the second type is in fact gamified. So for example, one of our games is about if you're a professional at a CPA firm, this one is called Qualify the Blockchain Use Case. So if you have a client, so what makes it fun and engaging is that you'll get 12 boxes, and each of those boxes have a potential question you can ask your client within the game. You can choose whether or not to ask it. And out of the 12 boxes, there's 5 relevant questions for qualifying the use case for a blockchain for your client. Now, if you select an irrelevant question, we have 5 hearts at the bottom of the screen, and you could lose a life, if you will. And if you lose all 5 hearts because you've asked 5 irrelevant questions, then it's game over, and then you have to restart. So that's part of the fun of it. So when you bring up Monopoly, it's about inserting key game mechanics like that. But then at the same time, as you go through it, you get feedback. If you ask an irrelevant question, you get immediate feedback as to why is that irrelevant. And then, yeah. So.
Now, you see, what I'm trying to figure out here is if I want to get involved in this type of blockchain gaming that you have, okay, why do I want to do this? Just to get actual practical experience in the field of accounting?
Yes, a mixture of understanding new technologies that are impacting the accounting profession. Now, it's difficult to say exactly when full blockchain adoption will occur. The best thing we can do right now is make yourself aware by reading articles, doing our games or simulations, getting hands-on. There, year over year, there's been more and more blockchain platforms that are kind of allowing business professionals to set up a blockchain network for use toward their client or managing data. Now, the key is that when this is in full adoption, then you need to be aware. You need to be aware, and the reason you would want to get prepared is really for that moment that your client asks. In fact, CPA firms are already being asked, hey, we take, what if we have digital currencies involved in our business process? Blockchain is a part of that. Now, to clarify, blockchain, one of the largest misconceptions about blockchain is it's strictly for digital currencies and Bitcoin. It's not just that. But you need to be aware of this now, because over these next few years, we'll see further adoption. And there's a lot of hype. There will, I believe, be a bubble because so many, people, investors are rushing into this, almost applying it in good ways and bad ways, or inappropriate, like not relevant ways. So I do believe there will be a bubble where we'll get down to the raw, true use case, depending on how these businesses prove out this technology. But we need to be aware as accountants.
If I wanted to get the expertise in this, do I have to be a raving genius?
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
no.
Yes? No?
No, you do not. So this is the interesting thing about any new technology that comes out. It starts with engineers. And last year, I love the transparency, again, year over year. Last year, when we ran that blockchain challenge, for the most part, some of these larger organizations like Oracle and Amazon, Microsoft, IBM, they created essentially the foundation of blockchain, and the infrastructure, if you will. Now, to log into their platforms, you have to have some technical expertise from an engineering perspective to understand how all the elements work. But now this year, I've seen new platforms pop up where it provides a better interface so that accountants can configure a blockchain protocol. In fact, so this year we did our second student competition, and instead of using Oracle, we used a platform called Voten, which actually provides the better front-end interface, so that we can configure blockchain for a supply chain management process. So I would say a way to think about this is, do we need to understand how, an ERP, do you need to be able to code within an ERP? No. But early on, when ERPs and, or QuickBooks or NetSuite or any Oracle, any of those platforms, it took the engineers building out the technology first. And then accountants should wait for that front-end interface to become available. So now we can log into NetSuite or QuickBooks, and it's easy for us to drag drop, have input fields and such. That's where blockchain has, year over year advanced, I would say.
What is your background? What did you major in college? I'm just curious.
Yeah, accounting and finance.
And how did you learn all this stuff? You don't have an engineering background, correct? You're not an engineer.
No, I've always had that itch. So I'm just about to turn 36. So I've got about 12 years experience as a CPA, 12, 13 years. And so I started in upstate New York. And after graduating with my accounting degree, I spent a few years in audit with PwC, got the CPA, moved out to Los Angeles, primarily because I like the big market, but I also like the technology scene out here. So over the last 10 years being in LA, I've always been deep into this technology scene, but also doing side kind of hobbies and projects, even just down to some basic website building and working with new tools such as those. Fast forward in the last couple of years, having started TrueUp, with my co-founder, we've been able to identify the need for merging the gap of showing accountants how does this technology work, how does it apply, and one of the most critical things is, at least we've found, is leveraging mine and any of our partners' backgrounds in accounting and our love for technology to provide this, bridge the gap between, hey, I'm an accountant, but I'm not an engineer. How does this translate? So for us, we provide that visual. We learn the technology from the grassroots. You don't need to be a rocket science when you have so much information on the web available to you, but that we translate it in this visual way through our simulations and games.
I have to go work in a public accounting firm on the audit staff to get into this?
It's still a critical thing. Here's the thing. Auditors aren't going away, but the profile and our skill set and what we'll need to do from day to day will change. There's no doubt about that. At what point in time does it change? And it's not just blockchain, but it's artificial intelligence and robotics, RPA, that is changing how we'll be pursuing our audits. I was at the AICPA headquarters just 2-3 months ago at their annual blockchain symposium. And it was just an amazing experience. We had partners from large firms all talking about the topic of blockchain and how do we audit the blockchain and what's the state of blockchain and what do we need to do to prepare. So that was a great collaborative session. But I think it's critical for what students think of the profession. Yeah, actually, the AICPA's trend reports and students, it showed a decline in just recently showed a decline in accounting graduates. And what I think we need to do is actually highlight more of the opportunity to work with new technology, actually running these student case competitions. If we want to get students re-engaged with our profession, show them the cool accounting technologies that they can leverage, right, rather than, hey, you're not going to have to, tick and tie things as much lately. It could become more of this review type of set of tasks, if you will. But one of the key things is showing them that technology is a big part of accounting. Because when we ran those blockchain challenges, it was the students that we didn't even need to offer, honestly, a cash prize for students to be engaged with this, because they just love playing with new technology. Most of them grew up with a smartphone in their hand. I would say they embrace it more than avoid it. I mean, just in speaking with these students that started their blockchain clubs, and then even presenting to students who are in such a club, a technology club, you just see it on their face. And one thing that's common across that I hear across CPA firms really is, how do we engage our new talent that's coming in? They seem, I hate to say, but they seem lazy, or like they're just they don't care about the job as much. I don't know if that's the fact, and maybe it is, but I think it's more about how you engage them again through technology. I think it's critical for making our jobs more efficient, and being able to play with the data analytics type of platform as part of my workday. So that they're not doing the nitty gritty, because I think, I think the ability to focus in on, again, like a simple bank reconciliation or some sort of analytics, is
Why don't
just.
they have a specialization on blockchain? Just like, they have CPA, AICPA has, you can be a CPA with specialization, personal financial planning, right?
Mm-hmm.
Are they anywhere near coming up with something, CPA having a specialization dealing with blockchain or artificial intelligence?
Mm-hmm.
Is there any talk on that? You weren't the president.
I will say it's a high focus for those. The recent TrueUp, TrueUp, our learning platform, we're part of the AICPA Startup Accelerator Program. We were selected for their 2018 cohort. Now this is a brand new program, or at least it's a couple of years old now. They're actually, I think, doing applications or just completed applications for their third cohort. What this from our experience being part of that program, they do have a high focus and on this, and they've dedicated resources to tackling AI and actually finding startups that are providing these types of services. Gapify is a bot and a robotics platform for accounting processes. DryRun is an automated kind of cash flow management software. Each of these new startups that they invite into the accelerator program are linked to these new technologies, and I think it kind of creeped up on us quickly how fast new technologies will impact our jobs on a day-to-day.
So everything is moving very fast.
Exactly. Which is scary.
I'm sorry, what?
It's scary because are we digesting enough of what the impact looks like? And we don't know. It's hard to say right now. And like I said, with blockchain, I think it's just so many people jumping on the bandwagon of, I'm going to do it for reward points. Well, do you need blockchain for tracking loyalty points? Maybe not. But then there are real proven use cases like Walmart, which maybe I can share more about that in a second. I think that's one of the best ways to communicate the power of what blockchain can do for supply chain management. But then again, we have these real use cases that demonstrate real proof. And by the time, let's pretend there is a bubble and too much investment and too many platforms trying to get a piece of the pie. Let's say we scrape away the fat. There will be winners at the end. Just like the 2001 bust. With the internet and actually, I'll say right now an interesting almost similarity. Granted, internet, blockchain aren't the same thing, but if we look at the what the internet did for us. Two things, and this is probably a good way to kind of put blockchain. So internet, back in late 90s especially, we started to discover and have the front end interface, the Netscapes and the Internet Explorers to play with the internet. And two areas that helped us significantly was expediting communication. Instead of having to write a letter, put a stamp on it physically and give it to a postal carrier where he has to drop it off at the office, and eventually that written letter gets to the recipient. Well, the internet allowed us to do that digitally and instantly. We could send that same letter so quickly. So emailing, messaging, communication. The second area with the internet is the commerce element, and it was interesting because now we can buy and transact over the internet. And when I was at the blockchain symposium, we had a couple individuals kind of debating, where do we start with blockchain? And it was a great opportunity to actually set our expectations. So blockchain can be applied, the underlying technology, which we probably won't get super technical into this webinar and podcast, but the underlying technology can be applied in many ways. And one of the very first ways was, in fact, Bitcoin and financial services, digital currency. Whereas, again, Walmart has really proven out this use for supply chain management and tracking goods and they're two very different things. Now, at that event in the blockchain symposium, when we broke out into sessions, we had two people debating, no, we have to start with financial services, digital currency. And we had another person saying, no, I disagree. We need to strictly focus on agriculture and food traceability so we can identify diseases that happen faster, right? If there's an E. coli breakout with romaine lettuce. So I kind of jumped in and said, well, they're mutually exclusive. things. They're two very different things, and we need to pursue both, I think, at the same time, because the essence of blockchain is it's a tracking tool. It allows multiple entities to get transparency because they're logging information together with consensus in one ledger. So if you think about the internet, okay, we could have adopted the internet strictly for emailing and messaging, regardless of use for commerce. Whereas you could have also done the same thing for commerce, use the internet for commerce, regardless of emailing. I think that's the same thing with blockchain as well. So if that makes sense.
No, it does.
Today, right now, we track activity, the movement of assets and goods, especially when there's intermediaries through separate systems. So if I'm a farmer and I get an order for grapes, from a retailer, I'm going to, ship those grapes to a quality control specialist and or some intermediary, and that intermediary has a separate independent ledger, and they record their information in this separate ledger. There's no transparency between the two entities, and eventually you will ship it off to whoever purchases these goods, this inventory, and that entity too has their own system. Okay. Now, what blockchain allows is for all three, the seller, the buyer, any intermediaries to, in a highly encrypted and controlled way, secure way, log that activity to a single ledger. So really, we call it a distributed ledger. And we do that because each of these entities get a real-time copy of what's happening when you're moving these assets. So we call it a distributed ledger. I mean, technically, they're accessing it from a single access point. And the blockchain administrator essentially controls who can view and not view it. And that's the essence of it. Could you just imagine knowing the exact real-time status of your goods being delivered, because you're looking at the same ledger that your seller had posted to and your intermediary had posted to. So let's look at, here's what Walmart did. So after the E. coli breakout with the romaine lettuce, there's always been this need or interest for retailers, especially with agricultural goods and perishables, to be able to trace their food faster. So, when the romaine lettuce and E. coli breakout happened, 2-3 years ago, we needed a faster way to identify this. So Walmart went ahead and decided to track mangoes. They set up a blockchain network with IBM on their food traceability network, and they decided to trace mangoes or track mangoes on a blockchain network using Hyperledger Fabric, which is ultimately the most foundational part of open source kind of blockchain technology. It's the platform, if you will, from the barest state. And after they tracked, Walmart, after they did a full transaction of tracking the mangoes from farm through any intermediaries, maybe logistics, and made its way to the store, what they did was they went to their store managers and asked their managers to trace the origin of these specific mangoes. And those managers, it took 7 days for them to identify the exact crop where these mangoes came from. And after using blockchain, though, while it took the store managers 7 days, it took them 2.2 seconds by logging into the blockchain network and seeing every event that occurred from the crop all the way through to the store with these mangoes. So imagine if we had that set up for romaine lettuce and the E. coli breakout. One, you could have identified that the bad lettuce faster, and instead of having to shred all sorts of good lettuce because we weren't sure if it was good or bad, you could have saved businesses a lot of money there. But more importantly, we could have traced the origin of the disease faster as well. And prevent more outbreak. Now apply this to all food across the globe. We could make a healthier world with this technology. Essentially shows the farmer's inventory system, and this is the reason why it took store managers 7 days. If you think about it, you have multiple systems, multiple parties, multiple documents, even down to the purchase orders and bill of ladings that are being exchanged manually across these three different entities. And the managers probably had to call all the way down through the logistics or farmers, however their tactic to identify the origin. But there's also wait time involved. Let's say the farmer doesn't get back to you fast enough. Well, there's friction and time delay there. Whereas by logging the mangoes on the blockchain network, they all are privy to the exact same transactions and details along the way. Does that make sense, Phil?
Yeah. Did they have problems again with lettuce? Is there E. coli now?
Yeah, actually, it looked like it just broke out. We haven't set up blockchain fast enough, huh?
I'm just wondering if they're using it this time.
Yeah, right. Actually, I just saw that occur, so I need to research or investigate that. But it will be interesting. In fact, this will validate how true this, how much this truly works, if you will. And one, if it does work, as we have shown, at least with the mangoes, and how quick you could trace it. Because what's the next step? Okay, we've traced down the bad crops. So now let's cut them off there. Then one, we proved that it worked. Let's quantify how much lettuce did we save because we traced it faster, or how many less people got hit with E. coli because we traced it faster. Those numbers I don't know yet, and that'll be the next stage. And that's why blockchain's in such an interesting state. The question is, when is it in full adoption? Tough to say right now, but the way we assess that is by being aware of what use cases are happening. One of the critical things that need to happen is actually a period of time of data collection, and actually being able to have a data set that we look back at and analyze. So, there's still, things that need to happen. And as I mentioned, even year over year, providing business professionals the front end interface, because quite frankly, to log into the Oracle blockchain or IBM blockchain, it's just too grassroots, it's too foundational. Whereas the platform that we used in our latest competition makes it user friendly. It's instead of, it's like using a NetSuite, drag and drop. It interprets like how to configure the blockchain easier for us. So we also need those platforms, front end platforms, to develop.
Tell me how I would get involved in this game.
Mm-hmm.
What do I need to do? I understand it's a game, trying to find out things. Who buys this thing? The employers, the companies, or you can buy them yourself?
Yeah, so essentially, to your point earlier, because professors need need more content to demonstrate the technology and the fundamentals. We have a university program that we allow professors to use it strictly for students for free. When it comes to formalizing, education at CPA firms, that's where they can pay per play. We have a few different options. We're subscription based versus a pay per play, depending on the firm and what their needs are and their use case, because that too is something we've seen evolve pretty quickly. If you think about just the last 2-3 years, it started with the big four, really getting hands-on with the technology, but now I'm seeing dedicated resources and leaders, blockchain leaders, being hired on at these firms, the top 20, 50 firms. It's starting to really trickle down, and they're all each starting to realize we need to get a handle on this, because if it hits tomorrow and our client says, hey, how can we leverage blockchain? They need to be ready. So even just from last year to this year, you could probably search LinkedIn and start seeing that these firms have blockchain leaders. So that too is interesting.
What I'm asking is, you want to first of all tell them how they can get in touch with you if they want to pursue this?
I'd like to take 3 minutes to walk you through this, tracking the grapes.
Yeah, go ahead, please.
So this is tracking grapes from seed to store using blockchain. And what we do in the simulation, in part one, we show tracking the grapes in a traditional way, the way we do it today, multiple entities, multiple systems. And then we show that same transaction with a blockchain network. So we've got our 3 entities. You can see Farmer Fran, she harvests the grapes and then she sends them off to Grader Joe, who assesses them for quality. And if there's bad grapes, he'll disqualify them, and he'll send the remainder off to retailer Ricky, who runs the store. So we say hello to each of them. And now here we have Farmer Fran. She receives an order from retailer Ricky for 100 bushels of grapes. And she'll enter that into her own system, ship that off to Grader Joe. So Greater Joe, in his own system, he enters, I received 100 grapes. However, 7 of them are poor quality, so we're going to disqualify 7. So now he has 93 grapes bushels of grapes that go off to retailer Ricky, who too enters the received quantity into his own system. So he logs it, and what happens is he's invoiced for 100 bushels of grapes. So there was some miscommunication, and now we need to figure out, why did Fran email or invoice Ricky for 100 bushels? So, in this simulation, we have a little exercise that kind of shows the friction of it. So what will happen is Ricky will email Fran and asking, hey, I got this invoice, but we only received 93. And then she'll email Joe to ask, hey, what happened? And then he'll respond to Fran saying, hey, we scrapped 7 of them in this transaction. It should have shown up in that report we sent you, and maybe it was overlooked. And so she'll make an update to her own system to correct the invoice to 93 bushels of grapes. So she'll email Ricky back. Again, all this emailing back and forth, but if this was all in one system, which you'll see in a moment, then it reduces that friction. So let's continue on. The 3 of them decide to join the Grapevine blockchain network set up by maybe some sort of authority. And this part essentially sets up the blockchain. So when you're setting up a blockchain, what you do is you create a channel, you establish a channel, which is essentially your ledger, and you can select who gets to see that channel. So we have Greater Joe, Farmer Fran, and Retailer Ricky. Now the 3 of them are on the same channel. Technically, you call them nodes on a channel. And then you add a smart contract, which we won't get into the technical part of it, but a smart contract essentially is this programmable coded contract that can facilitate transactions and trigger events, for ordering or showing receipt, and confirming, validating that the grapes have made its way. And one channel will have one smart contract on it. So let's do that same transaction with being on the blockchain network. Now, for those of you in the podcast, we should have a visual showing all 3 of them looking up at a big screen with the same ledger. They're on the same page here. So we'll trigger the smart contract, and Ricky will enter a quantity of 100 bushels of grapes, which he'll execute. And then you get this long hash string. And one of the key parts of or elements of blockchain is this encryption and highly encrypted cryptography is one of the key components. I mean, when we worked with Oracle, it was a 69 character hash string, which to recreate that is there's so many combinations and permutations. It just makes it difficult to hack, and that includes all the underlying detail of that transaction. So now Farmer Fran, in the same portal, she doesn't need to get an email. Maybe she gets a notification on the blockchain network saying, hey, Ricky wants 100 bushels of grapes. So she'll ship it off and update the block ledger that all 3 of them can see. And then Greater Joe, he'll disqualify the 7 again, and he'll update that same block ledger on the channel. In fact, he'll include an image that all 3 of them can see in real time of the 7 bad grapes. So again, they're all on the same page, and it reduces friction. It creates transparency. It's a single source of truth for these 3 individual entities. So he'll ship it off to Ricky, and he'll say, yep, I received 93, and now there's no contest. He even included the bill of lading that all 3 of them can see evidence now. And now Ricky is ready to be invoiced. Since this is essentially that single source of truth, technically you could automate the invoicing. That's yet to happen in the accounting space. I mean, this is future state, but we'll see how it evolves. What do you think of that, Phil?
I think it's very interesting.
Yeah.
But I'd have to be trained to some extent to understand what you're doing.
To your point, you don't, like, we realize that we have to start with a good visual and the right context, so that if I'm an accountant, this is how this applies to me, that front end phase. But then for you as an accountant, your next step is to get a little deeper and actually go from top down and start saying, okay, well, how does encryption work? Or let me sign up for the Oracle blockchain or Votin blockchain so I can get hands on and play with it. Now I get it a little more.
coming out of college, and I watched this and it says looks interesting. How do I know that I'd be good at this type of thing, blockchain? I mean, do you have a test to try them and see how they fare in the area? I mean, how do you find the people who you think could be experts in this area? Is there any way you do that?
Yeah, a couple of different ways. So like I said earlier, naturally there are student blockchain clubs happening, and professors who are building their curriculum and having that need for becoming, let's say, experts, or at least get leveling up on what blockchain is. So that's one way. But we also, there have been dedicated blockchain or technology groups at CPA firms who reach out to us for that further education.
Yeah, I want to get involved in blockchain. It sounds like an interesting topic, just like bots, robots. But I'm graduating college. I have a young child. My wife is not working, but I have to go. Who do I go to? A CPA firm who deals in this area, and then say, all right, I'll do taxes and audit right now, but I'd like you to give me training on this blockchain, right? But then I say, I want to really know blockchain. I don't want to work in taxes. I don't want to work in auditing, right? Just so I can work in that firm to get the experience, right? Is there any way to sort of circumvent that and just say, hey, CPA firm, I just graduated. I took the CPA exam, all right? Now, I want to be trained in blockchain.
Yeah.
Does that happen?
So CPA firms would be a great avenue, I would say, or at least as they start to increase their resources or education around blockchain, it's a good avenue. It's a good channel. There's certainly self studies on blockchain at TrueUp. Of course, our content. One of the this recent blockchain challenge we did, it was our second annual one. We generated 4 new games that actually take you through the flow. And what happens is, and we partnered up with a technology platform, a blockchain platform. And so the structure of this, and this is something actually, your viewers or any firm can come to us for, but they complete game number 1, which is called Block Party. And you have to navigate this town and interview and ask questions of individuals and decide who to invite to the block party. And what that relates to is who do you invite onto the blockchain network. So that's game 1. Then you move into, when you complete the first game, and this is part of the fun engagement, you unlock a document that actually gives you instructions to go and configure the real blockchain protocol in the Votin. It's Votin. There's supply chain management, specifically, logging information to the blockchain. And then in game 2, it's called Move the Meat. So basically it's showing that flow of setting up individuals on a blockchain. And it's a drag and drop. It's almost like you could do it on mobile, not so great on a small phone, but on tablets, certainly. You could drag and drop individuals onto their own systems and essentially set them up on the blockchain network. And then you unlock another document that allows you to configure the blockchain protocol even further. And by the time you complete that 4th game, you've configured in a real platform what a blockchain protocol is. That's our key. So TrueUp is all about not just simulations, but giving you that hands-on practical experience. We're not multiple choice here.
How do you determine when someone has enough knowledge to go into blockchain full-time?
Yeah, so that I would say is still in this middle state. So again, these firms, they too are still trying to get up to speed. In fact, so some of the critical things that need to happen, and I'll walk your podcast members through these specific bullet points on what you need to do, what are the barriers, and what do we still need to do in order for this to be in full effect. Some of the barriers, and I mentioned earlier, the maturity of actual data being logged in a blockchain network. Until that happens, we don't even know really how to audit or rely on this information. We're not ready for that. The cost to implement blockchain, that too needs to be either, really measured, to be frank, because there hasn't been enough blockchain implementation. Education around how it works. Interoperability between blockchain networks. So if multiple entities decide to join networks, they, to some extent, they may need to talk with each other. So To answer your question, if I'm at a firm today, the best we could do really right now is get educated and keep informed on advancements, the latest use cases, the latest cost or platforms that make it efficient for us.
Who's providing the education now?
Yeah, true.
And I'm asking, who's providing the education?
Yeah, actually, there's several platforms out there, but in the context of accounting, that's what true. I mean, background as a CPA and having seen a lot, TrueUp is all about relating this to accounting and finance. So we're definitely one of the key players in this. The AICPA has some courses as well. And there's several. There's a lot of at these conferences, a lot of speakers on the topic as well. But one of the most critical things, if you're a firm out there or a student, get hands-on. That's the most critical thing. You can only sit through so many lectures and have so many conversations, but you need to log in and look at it and feel it. So if I'm an individual, either come to TrueUp for these simulations, but if not TrueUp, go to oracle.com/blockchain or whatever the link is. Google blockchain platforms and Voten, again, the one we worked with. Go sign up for a platform. Just start navigating.
You want to spell that, Voten? How do you spell
that? Yeah, it's VOTTUN.com.
Okay.
Yeah, and I would say it's been great working with them, and I love the direction they're going, and they've really nailed it. Actually, one thing I find really interesting is they're actually also one of their uses of blockchain is tracking digital badges. So if I'm a learner, and this is how I put it to people, especially those with 10 plus years experience, can you remember your first training out of college at a firm? And maybe you'll remember it slightly. But what was your next training after that? Or if you moved to a new job and you did more training, one thing blockchain can do is actually create your personal learning log, if you will, so that you can instantly get this historical view, because along the way you're tracking your learning accomplishments in the blockchain network. You could have an instant view of your full history. So I think that's really interesting as well. But that's one thing Voten does as well. They focus on supply chain management and digital badging.
Okay. So it's Vince at TrueUp, that's one word, .co. And you can get to your website, www.trueupnow, right? trueupnow.com.
That's
and
right.
If you have any problems, just call me and I'll give you the correct thing. And once again, you can reach me at 301-874-4900, 301-874-4900, extension 5. I'm on the East Coast. But if this was of interest in any way, I would suggest to follow through and talk to Vince. Vince loves to talk to you.
Yeah, would love to.
He's a lonely guy.
Absolutely, that would be great. I love connecting with students, firms, professors on these topics. Yeah, thank you, Phil, for having me.
And once again, ladies and gentlemen, have a wonderful evening and be kind to each other. And we'll see you next time for another version of CPA Review and More.
Thanks so much for listening to CPA Review and More. If you'd like more information, look us up on YaegerCPAReview.com. And as always, if you've enjoyed this show, please rate and review on iTunes or your preferred listening platform. Again, thank you so much for listening, and we look forward to you tuning in next time.